reason, I'm looking through the San Jose Mercury in the just random stuff section for sale. And I see world's first video game computer space. No price, just call. I'm like, wow, I'm pretty interested in this. So I called the guy. I said, so you got a computer space? Yeah. He goes, yeah. First game ever. Okay, great. What color is it? And he goes, well, what color do you want? And I'm like, wow, this is getting very interesting, because who has a whole bunch of computer spaces, and who would know that they came in all these different colors? He goes, I got a yellow, a solid blue, metal flake blue, and metal flake red. And he goes, a whole bunch of other games too. Okay, great. Want to come up and see them. These were in a Quonset hut on a sunflower seed farm off of Highway 80 in Dixon, California, halfway between, you know, the Bay Area and Sacramento. And these things hadn't been moved in, you know, probably since 1975. And so I got in touch with Nolan and showed him the pictures and scratched his head, and then like a light bulb went off in his head. He goes, these were Ted Dabney's. These were Ted Dabney's units. This was his route. When he left, he took a route that we had, and he goes, this yellow one's the first one. He goes, I know it. That yellow one is the very first one. I kept the first one, which is a beautiful yellow computer space, and I kept Pong number 46. And we got the rest of them running and working as good as we could. We got it all for $5,000. I don't regret the purchase one bit. Not for a minute.
Well, I'd say 30 years to pretty much the present. The arcades have been relegated to the back rooms and the side streets, and generally been an unsavory type of place. What we want to do is bring the amusement game to age. If we can give it a new zip and a pizzazz, it's going to be financially successful, as well as, I think, a very serious part in the leisure time activity of the American people.
The marriage of traditional pinball machines and computer technology has resulted in the birth of a new breed of amusement games. And Nolan Bushnell is the man handing out the cigars. Bushnell has developed two such games, Computer Space and Pong, and believes that they and others like them will move the pinball industry out of America's bus stations and bowling alleys and into the space age. In 1971, Bushnell invented Computer Space, but sold production rights to Nutting Associates of Mountain View, California, for royalties based on the number of games sold. It proved a good deal for both parties. Sales already exceed 1,500 machines. Computer Space, like Pong, sells for around $1,000 and is played on the screen of a standard television set, which has been programmed to display the desired game. In Computer Space, the player controls a rocket ship, which is trying to shoot down enemy flying saucers while avoiding their missiles. If the player scores more hits than the enemy saucers, he gets one free play. By the time Bushnell invented Pong in 1972, he was able to form his own company, Syzygy Corporation in Santa Clara, California, to produce the game. He has already sold over 1,000 machines and expects to sell 10,000 in the United States by the end of the year. Pong, as the name might indicate, is a game of video ping pong. The two players turn dials which control their electronic paddles and volley with an equally electronic ball. The first player to score 15 points wins. While Bushnell did design and program both his games, the technology he uses dates back to the late 1950s. Thanks to research by the Defense Department in the wake of Sputnik, Bushnell is now able to act out his dream of a nation inhabited by thousands of Pong and Computer Space games.
The government spent millions of dollars on this technology, and as a result, now it's cheap enough that we can put it into a game and sell it for 25 cents for a few minutes and make $1 out of it. It's something that the research and development really was done many years ago, and now it's cheap enough that with PC boards and integrated circuits, we can use that technology to our advantage.
On the simplest level, what the VCS, the Atari 2600, what that is, it's a combination of plastic and computer chips that enables you to play a video game, an interactive video game on your home television, which is something that never really happened before.
If you're making an arcade game, it begins as a hardware project. If you need something more in the hardware, just put it in the hardware and you can use it in your game. The Atari 2600, we didn't have that luxury. The game was already in Grandma's house. It was already hooked up to her TV. And all we could do is make a different cartridge, sell that to the person, he plugs it in.
It was the thing that made video games a worldwide phenomenon. And all it is it's a box that enables you to play an interactive game on your TV. But on a cultural level, that's such a huge thing to do, because there were two things that achieved that changed the world, literally changed the world. One is it put computers in homes. At a time where IBM only had about 10,000 PCs sold altogether, Atari had millions of units installed, and every one of those was a computer in the home. The other thing it did was it created an interactive medium with television, which was always a passive medium. Before video games, people were just zombies sitting on the couch watching TV. But video games turned people into zombies jumping up and down on the couch yelling at the TV. And that was a very different experience. And I think that was huge in terms of taking people from a passive state to an active state. And we're still learning the implications of that.
The reason that Atari created the Atari 2600 home console was to put their arcade hits into the home. If we can sell home versions of our arcade hit games into the home, we can sell millions of them instead of just take quarters from the thousands of people who go to arcades. And so the hardware was designed to make it possible to play Tank and Pong. That's about all that they did in the hardware.
So the distinction is this. CoinUp gets to use more expensive hardware. They get to use tons and tons of hardware, and they get to refresh their hardware all the time.
I had played an Outlaw-like game in the arcade. I think it was Midway. And you know, I was just told to make a game, so I said, well, here's an idea, two guys shooting at each other. And so I made that game. My goal is to try to make it like the arcade game. So I could look at the arcade game and say, this is what it has to do. So there really wasn't any need for me to have communication with the arcade guys. I'm particularly proud of the Atari 2600 Canyon Bomber because it also has the Atari arcade game Depth Charge in it. So it turns out that in a 2K byte Atari 2600 cartridge, I simulated both Canyon Bomber and Depth Charge, which were probably $3,000 arcade game hardware.
When I was young, when I was little, I remember there was this drugstore, and in their comic book rack, they had these abridged versions of great literature. You'd read it, and it was the whole story of Treasure Island. War and Peace, a comic book. But that whole notion of an abridged version, that is what was going to happen.
When I did Donkey Kong, I had, not surprisingly, absolutely no contact with Nintendo. Coleco was able to get me a machine. So I had a machine that I could play and look at, and I had already played the game. And like David said, with Canyon Bomber, the game is the spec. Frankly, the hardware is so different in its capabilities that I can't think of any value I would have had getting in touch with anybody at Nintendo. It's like talking to the guy who created the Porsche Carrera about making a bicycle. I mean, it's like, there's not a lot there. Not a lot you're going to tell me. Here's this masterpiece, and do it on this toaster, you know. And I was young enough and stupid enough to not be intimidated. And I wasn't, because I was just a kid. And it's like, no big deal.
Tragedy, and I do believe that the fall of the video game industry in the early 80s was a tragedy. It was a tragedy to many, many people. It changed a lot of lives.
I think it's pretty obvious when it comes to the video game crash that Atari didn't have control over the quality.
I mean, it needed some sort of way to keep just anybody from writing cartridges for it.
And so many people saw this video game gold rush, and they just, started dumping crap. I remember going into KB toy stores and just seeing, really bad box art and just really just terrible looking games. And that's when I started losing interest, and the market became flooded just with garbage. And it ultimately led to, of course, things like E.T. being, actually buried in the desert like garbage.
And what happened was that E.T. became the face of the crash of the video game industry, and I, of course, was the butt behind the face. That's kind of the way it went.
Greed and hubris, that's what undid Atari. If they just had worked more from a place of focusing on making great games and delivering great games to the customer instead of how can we maximize revenue, I feel like they'd still be a huge powerhouse today.
Frankly, Warner did not understand technology. He didn't understand the consumer marketplace, the video game, and Ray Kassar, I think was afraid of releasing new product because it might not be as successful as VCS. So that's a sure way to fail. And
I regret that we didn't have a new console by '84 that would have made it so that Atari continued to be a really viable business.
we never, ever got down to ever having any process by which we could come up with a better system.
Even to say, I think people do believe that, like, if they just released like the 5200 earlier, or if they released the 7800, they had done different things, they would could never have, like, they would have survived the crash a lot better, and they would be like a powerhouse today, you know. Like, as a kid, I didn't know much about business, but I just felt like something was wrong.
No one knew anything. Certainly no one knew how to replace an existing console with a new one.
The real one-liner about why the game industry crashed and went away is that it was a first product life cycle and nobody knew what to do.
Bought a home computer, huh? An Atari 800 home computer. Nothing but the best for my son. Why Atari? Atari makes computers that, you know, seem friendly, part of the family. Want to show off? Sure. They're real easy. Terrific software, huh? Nice graphics. Now, how do you like this for sound capability? Impressive. It sure is. So what's his first project? Soon, the alphabet. A is for airplane.
Atari home computers. Only Atari puts so much in it for you.
I think the Atari 400, 800 were really the first home computers that I felt like were designed to be in somebody's home and for an average person to utilize.
Atari, you know, made some interesting decisions over the years. I mean, they were #1 in the world in making video games, but they saw home computers were coming. Apple II was out, and they said, we got to compete with Apple for, you know, computers. So it came down from on high that we were going to make a computer like the Apple II, but better in some way. But the engineering department said, hey, we're video game people. Why are we doing this? But they were told, you will do this. So what actually happened was the engineers made the Atari 800 into the next best video game player. It had all the sprite capability, it had coprocessors in there. You know, the first GPU in a computer was probably in the Atari 800. All of this stuff was going on in the engineering department, and yet the management thought we were making a computer. We were really just making a video game that we could make cool games on.
My participation was mainly on the prototype pre-production side. We had this very sophisticated, allegedly sophisticated, internal interactive test system called the PIT system that we couldn't get a single unit to pass. Labor Day 1979, can you guys work overtime over the weekend? We need to hand build some production units because we need to put them complete through the entire process. They need to be completely finished, consumer product in the box. We need these for JCPenney's so that they can make the holiday catalog. So we worked, I actually didn't leave Atari for about 3 days, hand building these units. And it was like 4 400s and 4 800s to ship on Monday to JCPenney's. They received them at their warehouse, they took pictures of them for the catalog, and then they immediately shipped them back to us. That was it. That's what we needed to do to get this product out.
My main contribution to the Atari 800 operating system, I created a language similar to PostScript that could draw lines and squares and circles and vector graphics drawn into the bitmap of the Atari 800 and put them into the operating system so that I didn't have to put it in any of my games. So I could borrow from the operating system stuff that I'd put in there and use it when making games. So yes, we were tasked with working on the operating system, but we did it our way. We did it in the video game method.
The idea came up that maybe I could get one of these machines for Christmas, and I thought I was going to get an Apple II because that was what I had at school and what I thought was cool. But I got an Atari, and it was an Atari 800 with a tape cassette drive. You know, at first I was like, oh, it's not an Apple, but you know, it's my own computer. It's super exciting. And then the more I got into it, you know, the more I realized it was so much better than the Apple. Probably piss off some Apple people, but it, you know, it was really an amazing machine. I mean, the graphics and sound on it were incredible, and it was a super fun machine to program. And so that was really what got me started.
Atari brings the computer age home.
Okay, Ma. What's the capital of Nebraska? Come on. I'm trying.
Atari home computers can teach you or reach you with important information anytime, day or night.
I already checked the computer. The Bears lost.
How about the Lions?
Oh, you owe me on that, too.
And if your jump shot is a little off, we can help you there, too.
Hey guys, how about a deal? The car tonight for Atari basketball.
No.
In fact, there's no end to your possibilities with Atari home computers. They're easy to use and afford. But best of all, they just might be the wisest investment you'll ever make.
Watch this. Hey, Mom. What's the capital of Delaware?
Dover.
I
remember sitting in the room with Jack, and Jack saying to all of us, let's go back to our roots. Let's do at least one more game system.
The controller is quirky. The industrial design of both the CD and the main unit are quirky. And the fact that, like, I guess somebody used the tooling on the main unit to make some kind of dental device. Like, it just has like this weird, quirky history that I think is also inviting.
One of the most interesting things about the architecture of Jaguar was this notion of having the Motorola 68000, which basically was responsible for booting and housekeeping, and then the Tom and Jerry chips.
I mean, I think at the time, 68000 was still a strong processor, but obviously it was in the Genesis and other things, so you weren't really getting that true 64-bit experience. But I think there's games out there that took advantage.
There's so many features in Jaguar that for a developer like Jeff Minter that did Tempest 2000 for Jaguar was like, wow, give me that.
Cybermorph, it did not necessarily.
When we started, video games were almost considered to be a bastardization of this wonderful technology. Why are you using it for fun when you could be creating missiles? I think we stood for innovation, and also we were the genesis story of the video game, which is kind of important. So I think you always have a hallowed position when you're the first.
Yeah.
When we chose the Fuji logo, I wanted to be an upward swoosh. And I think that if you look at the Atari logo, it's a collective, it's aspirational, just in the nature of the graphic. Also, Atari, I lifted it from the game of Go. So it's a game word. But I hadn't realized that it also means bullseye.
Right.
It also means jackpot. So, you know, it's got this affirmative. In fact, I was talking to a Japanese guy one time, and he says, very good name, Atari. Perhaps a bit boastful for Japanese.
You're like, spot on for Americans.
Spot on for Americans.
Yeah.
One of the ethos of Atari was work hard, play hard. So we always had games, not just Atari games, but foosball and pool tables in the snack rooms and what have you. What that said was, we don't care when you come to work. If you come to work, get your job done, we're okay. We're all adults here. And we don't care how you come to work. You want to wear tennis shorts and blue jeans? Do you want to wear a tuxedo? We don't care. We had one guy that liked to wear ball gowns, but that's another story. I could tell some stories, though, about how I used to mess with the people who copied me.
Oh, please. All right. Let's hear that.
Okay. Atari started by building games that you could do in a garage shop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so anybody that had a garage shop could copy us. And so of the 150,000 estimated Pong-type games that were created, Atari only shipped 30,000 of them. So we got less than a fifth of our market.
Right.
You know? And so as we innovated, people would start copying us. And I thought, I'm going to get them. So I had our semiconductor suppliers. We were a kind of a big deal in the semiconductor industry because they were selling a lot to the military and that sort of thing, but they'd sell 20 or 100 chips. We were buying thousands.
Right.
And so I had them mismark the chips. So that we had...
That you guys were using.
That we were using.
So if somebody tried to reverse engineer it.
So
wow.
if they reversed engineer it and just bought off the shelf those same numbers, they'd populate the board and they wouldn't work.
Did you ever hear of anybody doing that?
Oh yeah. we in fact,
brilliant.
We had one company that basically declared bankruptcy because they had a whole floor full of machines that they worked because they were hurrying to do it.
Oh man.
And we had the temerity to have a champagne party on their front lawn. We celebrated their demise. We invited them, of course.
Did they show up?
No.
What do you think Atari's role is, not just in video games, but in popular culture today?
Well, I think that Atari has an unassailable role as being the Genesis story. I believe that it is understood by a lot that it succeeded because of creativity. 30 of those years, it was kind of in hands that were not kind to it. Don't say anything bad. So I think that pieces of the brand were damaged. Not irrevocably, but it could have been husbanded better. And so right now, I think that it would be good to take the innovation legacy and push it forward into the future.